we think about safety in terms of the traditional wear your helmet and your steel-toed boots. But in my mind, when you're considering and leveraging D&I as a part of your policy and practice, as a part of your recruiting, your onboarding, your hiring, your culture of your organization, you're creating an insurance policy that ensures that you will remain relevant and valuable, and your organization will be sustainable for years to come, simply because you're thinking about much more than just a very narrow, homogenous, focused group that you're there to serve.
ESG has exploded into compliance and business consciousness in 2021. Join Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, on the ESG report and learn about sustainability risks, opportunities, and issues that business leaders and compliance professionals need to know about regarding ESG.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode. And today I have with me Kuma Roberts. We are going to talk about Kuma, her work, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and why that is absolutely critical in the corporate world. So first of all, Kuma, thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Thanks so much, Tom. I'm excited to join you.
Could you tell us a little bit about your professional background?
Sure. My professional background has kind of been all over the place, but the last 11 years, I spent working in the Chamber of Commerce industry. I started as the receptionist here in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the Tulsa Regional Chamber and worked my way into communications, did events, then spent a really long time, about 5 years, doing education, partnering our business community with our education and K-12 school system. I did workforce development, economic development, and ended with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and now consulting, working with a boutique consulting firm called Arrowhead Consulting.
So one of the things that intrigued me about your professional background was exactly your work at the Chamber of Commerce. In many of the listeners to this podcast are from the anti-corruption compliance space, work for multinational companies, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, of course, represents the chambers across the country in Washington. But the U.S. Chamber of Commerce really does a lot of education and helps businesses to understand the business reason for compliance. So when I saw your background, I really was intrigued to ask, do businesses understand now the business advantage of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI? And did you begin to see that change when you were with the Chamber of Commerce in Tulsa? And has that message been able to resonate now that you moved to the private sector?
Absolutely. So yes, companies absolutely understand the business case for diversity, equity, inclusion. Hence, we've seen the rise in the CEO Action Network, which is the Fortune 500 CEOs across the nation who are actively moving this work forward within their companies. And then, of course, we have smaller chambers of commerce who are pushing more of their members and smaller to mid-sized companies to join the fight as well. The business case is all about the fact that I think we've transitioned from, Tom, it being the right thing to do. That used to be kind of what we'd say, well, it's just the right thing to do, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But to move from that into the smart thing to do, and I've dared to say with a lot of my corporate clients, it's often the most profitable thing to do. I believe that when you are embracing the concepts of DEI, you are supercharging your power to be more profitable, more innovative, have a more extended reach into different market groups. And so I believe that it's the smart and profitable thing to do. And that's ultimately what the business case is.
So I am a child of the 60s. I was a kid when Title VII was passed. I went to segregated schools till I was in high school, and then we integrated. And so I have that background in me, and then I'll carry that with me forever. And to me, the most important thing about DEI was the addition of the word inclusion. So I'm a lawyer and words matter to me. But when I heard inclusion paired with diversity and equity, I saw and heard an entirely different conversation. The conversation, as you said, started off with, well, it's the law. Then it became, it's the right thing to do. Then it became, well, we're going to let you in. Good luck. But what I heard with the word inclusion is, we're not going to just bring you in. We're going to put you at the table. And if you don't talk, we're going to ask your opinion because we want to hear your opinion because it's diverse. It's not my opinion. It's not white male who grew up in a small town in Central Texas. It's something different. And to me, when I first heard that phrase DEI and I focused on the word inclusion, really the conversation in my head changed. And so I wanted to say that as a very long-winded way to ask you, how do you define DEI and how do you see those three words interacting in your world?
Well, I think everyone gets diversity, right? We talk about that all the time. It seems to be the most palatable of the conversation. It's all the ways we differ. And I like to say, yes, I talk about race extensively, but not exclusively, because there are, as you imagine, a bunch of sort of dimensions of diversity that really aren't dependent on race and or gender. Veteran status is one that's really huge that people ignore. Refugee and immigrant status, ability, LGBTQ. Honestly, I like to think about, I'm divorced. Perhaps maybe you aren't. I had an immigrant father. I had a mother who was a strong Southern Baptist. All of these bits of who I am make an individual diverse. And so that's diversity, all the ways we differ. Then there's equity, which is that access and opportunity for people who have been most disadvantaged. And that is interesting that you say inclusion was something that you focused in on, but equity has kind of been the newer add to the two words. But inclusion for me is when a variety of people have voice, power, and decision-making authority. So just as you said, when they've been invited to sit at the table, but not just sit at the table because that's diversity, but often asked for their opinion and then consulted and then heard and then truly a part of the decision-making piece of what our organizations and companies are doing.
I had the chance to read some articles about you or that you authored and then listen to some podcasts. In one of those, I found the phrase I wanted to read to you. Business practices that are grounded in DEI principles is an insurance policy to ensure relevance, value, marketability, and sustainability for an organization now and into the future. And I just wondered if I could ask you to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah. As companies haven't really leaned in on this insurance policy in a way. We think of safety all the time with our organizations. It's just something that's inherent. You protect your computer. You don't leave it in the front seat of your car because you don't want your car to be broken into and your computer stolen. We think about safety in terms of the traditional wear your helmet and your steel-toed boots. But in my mind, when you're considering and leveraging D&I as a part of your policy and practice, as a part of your recruiting, your onboarding, your hiring, your culture of your organization, you're creating an insurance policy that ensures that you will remain relevant and valuable and your organization will be sustainable for years to come, simply because you're thinking about much more than just a very narrow, homogenous, focused group that you're there to serve. You're really looking at a nation and a community that is changing more so than even I can imagine in Tulsa. It's been changing so much for us. That's where I am in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's the insurance policy that D&I provides for companies who consider it much more as they do their work.
One of the things that I found in the anti-corruption compliance world was, yes, there's a law you have to follow. Yes, there's regulations. But real change came when companies decided we have to do this. Basically, just as you said, as an insurance policy. I'm a recovering trial lawyer, so I saw that same mentality around corporate safety in the 80s and 90s, as you said. And now I just heard you talk about it in terms of DEI literally in the 2020s. It's a long-winded way of saying when businesses get behind an issue or a problem and put a business solution in place, that's when I have seen real change made. Mm-hmm. So with all of that, I'd like to turn to your consulting work now, because the company really seems to focus just on what I try to suggest, the business case. Yes. And there's a business reason, and more importantly, there's a business solution. So I wondered if first I could ask you, what's the business case for DEI?
Well, that business case is exactly what I said. It's that, like, for your organization, for your company, what is the thing that's going to keep people working for you so that you have better retention, reduce your turnover? What's the thing that's going to make you more profitable? What product and more innovation? How can you be creative to diversify your product offerings? In any of that, if you're thinking from a diversity lens, you're thinking about from equity and inclusion, all of that, when you consider it with those lenses on, make you a better company. And so the business case is, what's your bottom line? How are you benefiting from a business perspective when you consider diversity, equity, inclusion? And quite honestly, the proof is in the pudding. Deloitte, McKinsey, there's tons of research that says you're 36 times with just gender diversity to be more profitable. When you add ethnic diversity on with that gender diversity, it starts to become 87 times more profitable. I mean, there's just a ton of data that says that when you have diverse teams, managers who understand diversity, equity, inclusion, top-down leadership believes in it, that your company is just going to be much more relevant, much more effective in today's economy, global economy, by the way. And so that's the business case. What is it for your organization? You kind of have to have a little leeway to make that story what would be best for you all.
Another concept I came across in doing some research on your work was allyship.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you could explain to our audience, what is allyship and how can someone like me or a listener really help in that area?
Yeah. Allyship is really one of those things that I believe has gotten a little bit misconstrued over the years. To me, an ally is something that you are named. It's not a title you can claim for yourself. But allyship is that idea of demonstrating your solidarity to and for communities across difference. And so allyship is when you're doing your personal reflective work, you're reading some books to understand sort of historical significance of laws and policies in your community and the nation. It means that you are actively sort of supporting the concept of equity because you want to decrease inequity within your community, within your organization. And ultimately, through doing these policies, these practices, these sort of demonstrations of allyship, you could be named an ally by those who see that and name you so as a result. So that's really what allyship is. It's that solidarity in support of and in collaboration with those across difference.
One thing I think about a lot is the soft skills skills that you've used in your career, that I've used in my career. We're talking today, and this will go up on a podcast. So that means social media, many different things that you and I have done to not only create a brand for ourselves, but further our professional careers, whether it's learning from or giving to. How can we begin to help groups that have not had the experience that we've had in things like social media really understand those strategies and help them incorporate those tools personally?
Soft skills have really saved my personal life. I was a debater in high school, and so I feel like I learned so much through the process of how to construct an argument, how to critically think, how to do those kinds of things. What I think from a corporate perspective, because I work mostly with corporations, is we often wait as a corporation until a kid is graduating from high school, and then apparently they're ready for work or ready for college. And we're not doing that sort of pre-work. And oftentimes it's kindergarten or first grade where your organization, your company needs to be actively sort of working with, volunteering, and participating with students so that they understand, what are those skills? How do you shake a hand and look someone in the eye? How do you think critically? How do you start to work together as a team? These are great things that I used to learn in school, Tom. I don't know about you, but my daughter hasn't been in a classroom in 2 years thanks to COVID. So how do we make sure that we're connecting our world, our business world, the workplace with students to show them and demonstrate for them what those soft skills are and how they can be beneficial to them as they grow up and move into the workforce?
I've talked to numerous people in different disciplines, and one of the themes, as counterintuitive as it may sound, is sort of the following. Data has become much more important. Data analytics, and more importantly, how do you use data? But the key with data is having people to interpret that data. That has led to some to speculate that in 2025 or perhaps even beyond, the most important people in companies will be those who can accurately work with data. And that means that you have to acquire that talent and you have to retain that talent. And when I hear you talk about DEI, it seems to me that that is absolutely not even a key component, but absolutely critical component, both for talent acquisition and talent retention. Do you find that that message really resonates with your clients?
Absolutely. I have work across the nation where my clients are looking at dashboards. They want to know what the inequity is. And these are corporations, right? It's not just nonprofits. that are wanting to know the inequity across their community. They're leveraging US Census, American Community Survey data, police force data, all kinds of data sources to understand where there's inequity and how their organization can help impact those indicators. And so data has really taken a big rise in the past few years that I've been doing this work. I'll also say that I think in the past we've leveraged data, and I heard somewhere, and I use this phrase often, that we use data as a hammer. It's usually to sort of blame or create some sort of a divisive situation amongst groups. We need to learn to leverage data as a flashlight. And I love that. It's like to shine the light on areas where there can be opportunities for improvement. Let's turn the twist instead of using data as a way to punish or to sort of vilify communities or organizations who haven't really done it well or understood that data or had it right in front. And let's just use it as a flashlight to highlight those opportunities where people can do better. That's another twist we'll start to see as we move forward with data in particular.
Kuma, we're nearing the end of our time for this episode, but I have a special bonus question for you. And I developed this bonus question listening to another podcast you were on. And it was something along the lines of TV shows about blacksmiths, and that you spent at least a fair part of the pandemic engrossed in reality television shows about blacksmiths. Could you tell us your interest in that and why you were so engrossed?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So it's Forged and Fired. That has become my new obsession. It's a reality competition where blacksmith and people come together to forge a knife or some other blade of some sort, whether it be a Japanese sword or a cleaver or whatever. And the best knife, the strongest knife kind of is the winner. And I just love it. I love the heat. I love the fast-paced nature of it. I love that there's this historical nature to so many blades that I had no idea about. And it just was something that kind of popped up in Netflix that I said, I'm going to check that out. And I've been addicted ever since. And so, yes, you've exposed my secret. I am a forge head. Now, I don't have a forge. I've considered it. My husband has considered building me a forge in the backyard. I haven't done that yet, but for now, I'm okay with just watching the shows and binging them.
Well, my wife was a DIY fan, and she hooked me during the pandemic, so I completely understand it. It was, I thought, exactly what we needed at that point in our lives and in our country. So believe me, I completely get it. Before we leave, I wanted to ask if anyone wanted any more information on yourself, any of the topics we touched on, or consulting work, what would be the best way to find out more?
Well, you can always check me out at arrowheadconsulting.com. And that's our webpage. And I have a page there on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which includes a toolkit for you to download of some pretty basic steps your organization can take if you want to begin your D&I journey. And then, of course, LinkedIn, you can always find me. It's Kuma Roberts. I'd love to connect with anyone who might be listening.
I was going to say it, but instead I'll echo it. If you are interested in this topic at all, you need to check out the Arrowhead Consulting website because they have just a great variety of tools for you to use going forward. And I know this is an audio-only podcast, but if you could see the enthusiasm of Kuma and her smile that she brings to this, you will immediately see why she is so passionate about this area. So I'm going to, of course, link to those informational resources in our show notes. And I greatly enjoyed this, and I hope we can continue this conversation in the future.
We really should. I noticed your shirt is Star Wars, and I created a whole program, I just have to tell you, called JEDI, and it's justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So I've added a justice element. It has a whole Star Wars theme. So we might have to talk about that next time I come chat with you.